those topics in a lot of detail. So we won't cover those topics in as much detail. We'll just discuss while we're reading the verses, and then we'll take up the main topics in that section, if that makes sense and if that's okay. And if you guys have any questions, we can also address that along the way. Huh? Okay.
So let me share the screen so we can read the verses and then we'll discuss.
Yeah, thank you, Deidre. That is what we were thinking also. So the 5th chapter is Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. We spent a lot of time already talking about that. So the two main themes in this section that we are going to extract or zoom in is the peace formula, and that was something that Prabhupada spoke very strong, very much about, and it's actually the culmination of this chapter, how to attain peace. And
also the second theme is attaining a higher vision, which is a practical thing to do, how to see everybody equally, the concept of equality and discrimination, which is very relevant in the world today. So we'll touch on that in a separate session. So let's read the verses for the chapter. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" Kind of a repeat question, because Krishna in the 4th chapter, he again glorifies jnana, like action in inaction, inaction in action, and then he also talks about jnana in verses 41 and 42. So here Arjuna he's still not clear about he's equating jnana or knowledge with renouncing work, and so Krishna has to again come back and correct him.
I was also thinking, as we are reading this section, that this also shows, like we talked about doubt, right? So we see that Arjuna, not just that he has doubts, but he's repeating his doubt.
Yeah.
Even after Krishna has gone through so much explanation, you would think by now this should be clear. So I guess it's also a takeaway for us that we should never feel embarrassed or feel uncomfortable if the same doubts pop up again.
Because there are many different aspects and we have many different fears. So doubts can come in different forms. So Krishna is going to again patiently explain the same concept.
So the personality of Godhead replied, "The renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work." So we want you to pay attention to these verses, because these verses are all going to get tied together in our discussion on peace. So we'll see how they get tied together.
So renunciation of work is, because once one renounces work, which is the path of jnana yoga, one doesn't have any outlet to engage their senses, and if the senses are not purified, then the person is kind of stuck. He can't engage his senses, but he has desires to engage his senses. So then the person will end up doing something which is actually harmful.
It's kind of holding your fist too tight, right? Like, for how long can you hold your fist like this, right? After a while, this is a more natural place to be. So artificially holding back and saying, I'm going to renounce everything. We'll get into this in our presentation more.
One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty Arjuna. So one may ask that, okay, if I'm going to engage in work, then the fruits will come, so I will get attached to the fruits. So how do I deal with the fruits? And how do I stay renounced while I'm working? So Krishna gives the key that one neither hates nor desires the fruits of the activities. So one has to develop the detachment towards the fruits, not towards the work.
And we'll talk more about this, that how both desire and hatred, they're both two sides of the same coin. We'll get into that.
Only the ignorant
Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both.
So here Sankhya again means jnana or knowledge. So Arjuna is thinking that only through renouncing work he can attain knowledge. But Krishna is saying that that is not true. Even while engaging with this world through karma yoga, one can obtain higher knowledge. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study, which is Jnana Yoga, can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. So a person who is engaged with this world, like a householder or a businessman or whatever, sometimes we have this conception that I'm so much engaged with the world, how will I achieve higher knowledge? And Krishna is reassuring us that actually it's a lot easier to achieve higher knowledge when you're engaging with this world with the mood of devotion, and being detached from the fruits of our work.
And it also makes one see that, because yesterday we had this discussion about the relationship between logic and reason and bhakti, and sometimes the two seem sort of like opposed to each other. But as we discussed yesterday, that actually analytical study is very much a part of our practices of bhakti, and we don't really see them as being separate. It depends on the conception with which we approach it. That is the key there.
So in the path of Jnana Yoga, the purification of the mind and senses happen after directly renouncing. They depend on the renunciation to purify the senses. But in Bhakti Yoga, the engagement in the work itself with that mood of devotion.
Oh, volume is low, huh? Is
it low for everybody or just for
Suvarna?
I thought it was okay, but again, it could be.
It could be louder.
Okay. No, I'm good with it. But if somebody else feels it, that's good.
It's the loudest we have. Oh. Okay, you can come closer to the
Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. So, important point that just renouncing makes the heart not happy. It becomes dry, because there is the senses need engagement, the mind needs engagement, and Jnana Yoga provides very little engagement for the mind and senses.
One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So now we are seeing, right, the effect. The one who's working in devotion and who can control his mind and senses, is very dear to everyone. And this is sort of counterintuitive, because sometimes when you see a person who's detached or who has controlled his mind, one would think, oh, this would mean the end of my relationship with this person, because this person will stop caring for me. But actually, it is described that such a person is capable of offering selfless love, because he really has nothing in stake, right?
And you can see that in the life of Prabhupada, how he was, here three qualities are described: Vishuddhatma, Vijitatma and Jitendriya. So that means somebody who's pure, somebody who has controlled his mind and who's controlled his senses. Jitendriya means controller of senses, Vijitatma means controller of the mind. So such a person like Prabhupada, he was so dear to everybody. Everybody was touched by his qualities and his love. And so many of his disciples, they have the same, they exhibit the same qualities. So such a person, then one can think that, okay, such a person, how does he really, he himself sees the work that he's doing? How does he see the world around him and his body? So Krishna explains that here, a person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving and opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. So such a person has realized that he is a spirit soul, and the activities of the senses, they are happening by the forces of nature, and he has nothing to do with them.
Sometimes the example that is used is that of an intoxicated person. When a man is intoxicated, then he doesn't know if he's wearing the clothes or he's to him it just he's completely aloof from, and sometimes even unaware of his material existence.
It happens to us like many times when we are thinking of something else and we are driving. So you drive for 20, 30, 40 miles, or while we are talking on the phone, we take the exit, we do all the things, but we are not aware that we are doing it.
One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water.
So the sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that this lotus leaf is something that comes again and again in the Vedic school, and it is considered to be a symbol of purity and a symbol of being detached, because the lotus flower actually sits in a murky water, very muddy waters. I don't know how many of you have actually seen a lotus flower, but then its leaves are completely untouched, and even when there is a drop of water that lands on a lotus leaf, it's amazing. Like, it looks like a little pearl, and then and just this tiny movement, it just it never wets it. It just sort of slides away, and it's exactly the nature of a true transcendentalist, that nothing stays on him, right? He's very slippery that way, and whatever experiences come his way, he remains untouched by them.
So here, like in the previous verse, somebody may ask that, okay, what about the reactions to the work? So a person is working in this consciousness, but does he have to suffer or enjoy the fruits of his activities, or the reactions of his karma? And this is explained by Krishna here, that no, he's not touched by the karmic reaction, just like a lotus leaf is not touched by the water. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. So then somebody may ask that, okay, he's working in this way, he's not touched by the sinful reactions, but what's his motivation for working? Why is he working? So here Krishna explains that such a person actually is very motivated. He's working for two reasons. One is for the purification, and the other reason is for the satisfaction of the Supreme. Actually,
this is another doubt a lot of people have, that if I take up spiritual life, I'll lose all motivation for work. But actually one becomes even more motivated, because if you work for the motivation of position, power, money, then those motivations, you lose steam. You really lose steam, because you get to a point where you say, well, I got all the money I want, so how do I find a motivation? So but when you are working in this spirit, then the motivation is actually deeper, and then one can continue to be enlivened in one's work. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace, because he offers the result of all activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who's greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled.
So this is more like a summary of the last few verses, that the two paths a person can take, and one person achieves the union with the divine, other person becomes entangled. So in the next 4 verses, Krishna is going to now explain that who is actually responsible for whatever we do, because there is a doubt. A doubt can come in the minds of a person that, okay, if I am not this body, and the body is driven by the forces of nature, then maybe the forces of nature is responsible, or maybe God is responsible because he is controlling the forces of nature.
Should we do this like next time, or should we?
Because we have to read the peace formula also.
We can just go I don't know how many verses are there in between, because we could divide this between those 2 segments. So let's see, 13.
So this can be the higher vision, right?
Yeah.
So let's go to the last verse then.
Yeah, because this is how many verses here? Let's see. 29, yeah. So I think we're right there.
Yeah.
We stopped at 13th, yeah.
So we'll come back to verse number 14, because that's our next section, which is higher vision and equality.
But that whole section actually ended, if you remember, at the idea of peace, that such a person is peaceful. And so this verse 29 is sort of a culmination of all those verses. So we are going to read text 29, combine that with the first 14 verses, and do our presentation today.
And then this verse is spoken by Krishna to convince Arjuna that he can be peaceful even on the battlefield. So what to speak of us in our different situations of life. So this is a famous verse, we can recite it. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhidam sarvabhutanam yatva mam shantim richati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam. The Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So We'll explain this verse a little bit more when in our presentation. But this is like the peace formula. How does one find peace?
Can you just quickly just see? I think there's some comments and then we can move on. It's plenty loud here. Okay, good. That's fine for me. Good, good, good.
So let me share the screen for our presentation.
So this section is called the Peace Formula. This is chapter 5, Action in Krishna Consciousness.
Yeah, this word peace is a very interesting word, and if you ask people, they have so many different understanding of this word. So we'll try to understand this a little bit more in this section. What is peace and how can we attain it? How people have tried to attain it.
So in Sanskrit, the word for peace is Shanti, and this is actually a verse, and Tina Turner sings it. It's actually very beautifully sung. So we'll start with this. Okay, it's muted. Can you?
The volume high?
No. Need fast forward. Keep moving. Yeah. Yeah, try there. Try there somewhere we can move from. Let's move forward. Let's fast forward. Svastir, Bhavatu. Stop here. So this is a mantra.
Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu, that let there be peace everywhere, or everybody be in peace. Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu, let everybody feel the completeness. Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu, which means let there be auspiciousness for everybody or everywhere.
So now the question though is peace possible? You know, we have such a desire for peace, and as we can see that we want that everyone should be peaceful. And so this was a survey that was done. I think it's part of National Geographic.
Yeah, it is National Geographic.
So we can see what people think about peace. Is peace on earth possible?
War and peace, I think they're binaries. I don't think you can contemplate the one without the other.
So they asked people in 22 countries.
Yes, isn't that the giant question? Depends.
Credo che bisognerebbe prima chiedersi se sia possibile la pace dentro noi stessi.
世界和平有冇可能？我覺得唔係太可能嘅嘢嚟嘅。
Yes, peace on earth if there's unity in all of us.
Ik ben bang van niet. Het zit in de aard van de mens om oorlog te maken.
많은 어려움이 있겠지만 가능하다고 생각합니다.
Yes.
Nee,
J'ai l'impression que tant qu'il y aura des hommes, il n'y aura jamais de paix.
Физика και είναι εφικτή. Απλώς πρέπει να κατανοήσεις πρώτα την αγάπη.
Теоретически, конечно, возможен, а практически, мне кажется, нет.
Teško, ali nadajmo se da jeste.
Yo creo que la paz es posible si colaboramos todos.
Multiplicar anthropos.
Yes, I do believe peace on earth is really possible.
Voilà.
Venimos muy fácil.
Tak je složité.
No, non è possibile la pace nel mondo.
Te quiero tu muelas.
Diría que es casi imposible que haya paz en la Tierra, porque las opiniones humanas nos llevan a discutir y dejar de pelear en parte sería perder nuestra humanidad.
Sì, sempre.
No.
Io tanto si fa.
Prima pensate a far pace con mia madre e me e poi pensavo alla pace con loro.
Dus dat betekent begrijpbaar in de woorden.
So it goes on, and we can see that I think the majority, the consensus was not possible, right? Or very
Very,
difficult.
very few of them said yes. Some of them said about finding peace within first and the love and
And maybe you guys can also share what you think, right, about peace, whether you think it is possible. Though it's something that we are all desiring, right? We all wake up in the morning and we hope that we have a peaceful day. So, yes, yes. Nice. Exactly. Peace has to come from within. Ray says, Patanjali says, our most sacred properties are peace. I don't think worldwide peace is possible, but I think individual peace is. Beautiful, yeah. Yeah, I think there is a consensus that. And yeah, and Krishna actually, he's going to end the section and talk about how it's possible to actually have peace in the
We
world.
can get together.
So there has been so many attempts made over the course of history to attain world peace. It's a goal, right? And whenever there is a big war, or people just come together and say, how do we create peace? Because even though we want to strive for individual peace, but they're sort of connected, right? Individual peace will lead to global peace, as you are describing, but also when there's peace on earth, then it's that much easier, right, for individuals to also be able to find peace. Like right now, of course, we can still connect with our deepest essence and stay peaceful no matter what.
yeah, and people see that there's a connection between governance and the state of the things of the world. And therefore people come up with different mechanisms of governance, thinking that will bring peace. So communism was one such idea, and Stalin actually believed that this will bring actually peace to the world.
Because one of the reasons why we are not peaceful, and we'll see this in the course of our presentation, is because we have resources. There is land, there is wealth, there's just so many resources. And how do you divide these resources? Like, I don't know if you're aware, but in many parts of the world, including India, people actually are fighting over water. Because anytime a resource gets scarce, then what do you do with it? And so, this idea of dividing the resources and making the state the owner of all the resources is one way that people thought, oh, everyone will get a piece of that and we'll have a peaceful society, a classless society. But of course, history tells us otherwise, right? And then there are others who very, very strongly believe that actually capitalism.
Yeah, because capitalism, people got tired of communism, and then people think that capitalism where private property and people can just prosper based on their own endeavors, maybe that will bring peace. And yeah, maybe it has in many degrees, but as we can see, there are so many negative side effects of this that people
I don't know if it has really have, because I mean, we've been looking up and looking at the statistics and facts, and it seems that the richer has gotten richer and the poorer has gotten poorer. And maybe the nature of the wars have changed, but ultimately people are still experiencing great turmoil.
Yeah, and then the whole planet is getting stripped of the resources and environment pollution, and it's all coming from this idea that I'm free to amass as much as I desire.
Yeah, and just by doing that, somehow the greater good will automatically happen, right? I mean, I remember when I was in school, I read Ayn Rand, and as fascinating as her idea is of the virtue of selfishness, but at the same time, we don't see that, right? That it does not translate into reality, because there is something called greater good. And So this is a very, very shocking study done by Stanford. Do you remember the
Stephen Stedman, he was...
No, but what was the institute? I think it was done by Stanford.
I forgot the name of the institute, but
Yes.
they did it was a research that they did, bringing together...
Okay, here it is. Stanford Center for International Security and Arms Control. It was a mouthful, so that's why I didn't remember it. Yeah.
So, and what they found, they did a study of peace efforts brokered by United Nations and other big countries in places like Rwanda, Angola, Bosnia, and all these places which were really torn by war, internal civil wars. Because after World War, the kind of wars we mostly had was civil war or invasion of a smaller nature.
Or terrorism. Yeah.
But what they found was that in all these places which were torn by civil war, they found, this is their conclusion, that civil war, the most common type of, by a huge magnitude, more people died after the peace accords in Angola and Rwanda than during the civil wars that preceded them. So quite shocking. And then there's another scholar, James Steer, he said the brutally...
He's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Peacekeeping and Humanitarian Affairs. And he says that the brutally depressing fact is that for most of the parties in most of these conflicts, war is a safer bet than peace.
Because they found that the war kept everybody together, even the opposing factions together, and as soon as the peace was achieved, then everybody tried to get their piece of pie. And that led to actually more conflict and more violence.
So this is actually, a situation, and actually one of the qualities of a transcendentalist or a spiritualist is called paradukha dukhi. Paradukha dukhi means that he himself has, just like what you guys were just saying, that we can find peace within. But he or she actually experiences great pain when it sees the suffering of the world. So this is actually, the situation where, there's this person called Steven Pinker who has done a lot of studies, and he says that how we have never...
He published this very famous book, basically arguing that over the last 100, 200, 300 years, we have actually made great progress because of capitalism and science and all that. And the world is much better place because we have reduced the number of wars, and people are not like savages, living like savages anymore, and blah blah. So
and that study is like, it's
become the gold standard.
Yeah, it's become the gold standard. But the thing is that, people's own experience of the world does not match up to his study. So he says the world is a better place, but they've also found on the Pew research that they've done that 9 out of 10 people feel that the world actually has gotten worse. So it doesn't match up. So this is actually the American paradox, which was published by David Myers, who's a professor of psychology from Hope College. And he says that the American paradox is that it's the best of times and it's the worst of times.
Because it seems like we're making progress, right? We have so much bigger houses, bigger cars. His population has doubled since World War II. Food production has tripled, and food is cheaper than ever before.
And then, of course, we were once watching how even in America, what was the standard size of a home.
Yeah, it was like single family home was like 500-600 square feet.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like now we probably have a bedroom, or maybe bedroom and a...
Many people have a bathroom which is 500 square feet.
So of course the houses have become bigger. We have much better cars. The food choices, they're staggering. I don't know if there's any place where you can have this many variety of food and you get all vegetables in all seasons, right? Better education, well, some could say that people have opportunities for good education.
Or maybe the literacy rate has gone up around the world.
Yeah, more jobs. So far we've had a good, our unemployment rates have been quite low.
Quite low, yeah.
And so there are more people working. For sure, better medical facilities, right? You could say because of technological advancement, we are able to cure perhaps so many diseases which we couldn't before. And lower mortality. So
the lower mortality is also debated highly. Many people believe that, maybe in the developed countries, but in other places, the mortality is still there, and it's affected by so many reasons.
But then it's also the worst of times, and this is our experience, right? That the divorce rate has doubled. Teen suicide rate has tripled, And this is actually one of those things that has always shocked us, to see how children as young as 10 and 11 and 12 are actually depressed and
or
have
committing suicide, or because of so many different reasons. I guess there's too much demand.
pressures,
peer pressure, or the pressure of now the social media. It's nobody's able to live in peace.
So the recorded violent crime rate has quadrupled. The prison population has quintupled.
Yeah, it's everything is the prison whole incarceration has become a big business. Most of the incarceration in America is now contracted to private companies who are for-profit private companies, and they actually make more money by keeping people in prisons rather than letting them go. So the whole objective of reforming people has disappeared. Now it is taken by profit. Percentage of babies born to unmarried parents has sextupled, and that really
Arjuna, actually, this was Arjuna's great concern, right? That this would lead to Varna Sankara, which means children who have really no place to go. And there was a time when we actually got an opportunity in Baltimore to go visit this in-between house, and this was actually young girls who, so they were they didn't really have a place to go, and they were
in a foster home before, and the state could not find the next foster home for them. So
and
they were in this in between.
Yeah, they're like in this in between place, and when we spoke to the supervisor, because they wanted us to come and offer meditation sessions and just spend time with them with different spiritual activities. So we went ahead and did that with the girls, and the supervisor was telling us they're sort of like, if we don't take care of them, so they'll just fall through the cracks. And
many of them probably will end up in maybe sex trafficking or some kind of abuse, horrible abuse. And
so so without proper care provided to children, then the society actually suffers, right? And cohabitation, which is a predictor of future divorce, has increased 7-fold. And this is the really scary one. Depression has soared to 10 times the pre-World War II level by one estimate. So, and we see that. I mean,
even little children, they're getting depressed now. They're put on medications in elementary schools. I mean, that was never heard of before.
And Time magazine actually ran an article where it talked about how mental health is going to be the #1 problem in coming times, if it is not already so. So we see that how our peace is something that we are all struggling with, and so sometimes somebody could say, well, there are few ways that we deal with this,
because I guess people think that the reason I don't have peace is that I don't have enough, or I'm poor, or whatever. If I got more power and more money or whatever, then at least my life would be peaceful. I'll make my life peaceful. So this is a very interesting story. This farmer, he was not a farmer but a fisherman rather. He was living with his wife near the ocean in like a really broken up place, which was really horrible. And you're somehow just making enough money to survive, fishing and selling the fish. So one day he caught this really magnificent fish, which was out of ordinary, and he brought it home. But this fish requested him that, please free me, I'm really suffering here. So somehow this poor fisherman, he got pity on him, and he released the fish to the and he said, well, you release me to the water, and then you can whenever you want something, I can fulfill your wish. So he just let her go out of the kindness of heart.
But when he goes home and he tells his wife gets really upset, and she says, what's wrong with you? Like, you're such a fool. We have no house, we have no money. Why don't you go and ask him? So he goes to the fish and says, okay, my wife really would like a better place to live, and
she just likes to get a hut. Like to get a hut. So he goes to this fish, and then the fish was actually, the fish said, I'm the prince of the fishes, and I have a lot of power. So that's how he knew that she was special. So he goes to the fish and says, okay, my wife, he was really hesitant. He didn't really want to take that favor, but the wife pushed. So he went there and asked her, and by the time, and the fish says, okay, by the time you go home,
it's already there. So then he goes back, and the story goes on. The wife says, well, we got a hut, but that's not enough. So now, ask him to give us a palace.
Yeah.
So then the fish gives them a palace, and then the wife is still not happy. And then she says, I have a palace, but there is, so much land, and this landowner, I would like to be the wife of the landowner. So go ask him and tell him that we need to become the head of this village. And so then that happens. And then, then it goes on, and then she says, well, I'm still not satisfied. Now
I want to become the king.
I want to become the king.
So the fish said, okay, you can become the king. And she becomes the king with a big on a throne, and then her crown is like really tall, 12 feet tall crown.
And then she says, I'm still not satisfied. Now I want to become the emperor, right? And then she's still not satisfied. Then she finds that, the emperor actually bows down to the Pope. There are many versions, actually, different cultures. This is a story that is actually told in many different traditions, different cultures. So in one story, she says, so the Pope actually, the king bows down, to this big guy, so this big religious leader. So she says, I want to be that. And then she realizes that, but actually, the God is the person who has full control over everything. He's the one who controls the rain, and the Pope actually bows down in front of God. So I want to become God.
So the fisherman goes back to the fish and says, she wants to become God. So she says, okay, so be it. And when he comes home, he sees that he's back to his old broken up place, which was smelly and really bad, horrible. So that's her reward for trying to become God. And this is, I guess, we are all trying to become God in this material world.
So that is our, sort of our struggle, right?
Yeah.
That we want to control everything, and we want to be the Lord of all that I survey. And in the process, we don't really get peace. Rather, we become frustrated, right? So I think we just want to, before we get there, I think we should read this. Just give us a minute.
Which one?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
What are you doing?
I wanted to read Alexander's quote there, connected to that, and then come back to. So.
This is Alexander the Great, who invaded many countries and became the emperor of land far east, all the way from Greece to wherever. And when he was about to die, he requested that when my casket is being carried to the grave, leave my hands hanging outside.
For empty-handed I came into this world, and empty-handed I shall go. My whole life has been a hollow waste, a futile exercise, for no one at death can take anything with them. So this is Alexander the Great, and this kind of connects with the story, right? That this desire to conquer all the land and become the greatest, we think that somehow that restlessness within the heart is going to somehow become pacified the more I can conquer and become the strongest and the most powerful. But it doesn't do anything. And it's on this note that in Srimad Bhagavatam, earth actually, she laughs. There is just like we're reading Bhagavad-Gita, there is a Gita called Bhumi Gita.
So this Bhumi means earth, and she sings this song in a sense of wonder and kind of surprise at how so many kings have tried to conquer her, but they have all basically merged into dust. So we'll open that prayer and Gita, and we'll sing those verses, which are beautiful.
Few of those
Some
verses.
of them.
This is very beautiful because she's actually read it and then you'll know. Also getting.
So this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 12. Chapter 3, and this is called, the chapter is subtitled Bhumi Gita. I think, Bhumi Gita. So starts from this one. Drishtvatma nija eva gran nripan hasati bhuriyam aho ma vijigi shanti.
Sukhdev Goswami said, seeing the kings of this earth busy trying to conquer her, the earth herself laughed. She said, just see how these kings, who are actually playthings in the hands of death, are desiring to conquer me.
Kama esha narendranam moghashad vidusham api yena pheno pame pinde. Yeti Vishambhita Nripa. Great rulers of man, even those who are learned, meet frustration and failure because of material lust. Driven by lust, these kings place great hope and faith in the dead lump of flesh called the body, even though the material frame is as fleeting as bubbles of foam on water.
Let's skip that. So read the translation. Kings and politicians imagine, first, I will conquer my senses and mind. Well, I don't think the kings think like that anymore. Then I will subdue my chief ministers and rid myself of the thorn pricks of my advisors, citizens, friends, and relatives, as well as the keepers of my elephants. In this way, I will gradually conquer the entire earth. Because the hearts of these leaders are bound by great expectation, they fail to see death waiting nearby.
Samudra varanam jitva mam vishanti abdhi mojasa kiyadatma jay shetan muktiratma jay phalam. After conquering all the land on my surface, these proud kings forcibly enter the ocean to conquer the sea itself. What is the use of their self-control, which is aimed at political exploitation? The actual goal of self-control is spiritual liberation. So they exhibit some self-control because through that they achieve great physical and mental power so that they can control others. But that is not the real purpose of self-control.
O best of the Kurus, the earth continued as follows. Although in the past great men and their descendants have left me, departing from this world in the same helpless way, they came into it. Even today, foolish men are trying to conquer me. So this was spoken 5,000 years ago and we can still see this, right?
For the sake of conquering me, materialistic persons fight one another. Fathers oppose their sons and brothers fight one another because their hearts are bound to possessing political power.
Political leaders challenge one another. All this land is mine. It's not yours, you fool. Thus they attack one another and die.
And then she lists the name of all these great kings. We're not going to repeat the names, but in the end she says, nevertheless, O Almighty Lord, although they lived their lives intensely trying to possess me, these kings were subject to the passage of time, which reduced them all to mere historical accounts. None of them could permanently establish their rule.
So this is very beautiful. I mean, it's a really nice, I don't know what you guys thought about it, but we really like these beautiful song where it shows the nature of our situation here.
Yeah, so we are reading from 12th canto, chapter 3.
Yes, I agree completely. The food aspect, I am totally in agreement that, she used people as a means to an end, not selfishness in a healthy way. Yes, I disagree with the food aspect, especially the quality of food is gone more, but it is GMO and proper food is, I totally agree with you that it doesn't taste, it tastes like cardboard.
And maybe this study was done maybe 20 years ago, David Myers. This is not a recent study.
Okay.
So at that time, this whole GMO thing was not so prominent.
Okay.
Maybe 30 years ago.
But even if it was, they would say that, yeah, we have more food even today.
Yeah.
But it's the quality of food, that we can see. So I guess, I don't know, should we continue or?
I think it's 8:30, so we can do discussion.
Okay. Let's just see if that's a good place to stop though. Let's just, can we just
mute some people are unmuted.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna. Yes.
Each piece possible.
Yeah. So
this question, there is always opposite values are always complementary. When there was Ravana, there was so much restlessness in Lanka, but simultaneously there was Rama. And there was complete peace there in Ayodhya. For this time, this is Corona pandemic. But for spiritual seekers, it is a great opportunity. So this problem and opportunity, they come together. There is Samuhik Karma and individual Karma. In Samuhik Karma, we see that it should change. The world war should stop. It should not happen. Or the bigger problem should not happen. But this Samuhik Karma is the result of so many people's individual karma. We have the opportunity to associate ourselves with good peoples, to have good work. So in preparation of curd, we want curd, but it is the small quantity of curd that we add to milk, it results in curd. In a wall, there is one brick. If the size of that brick is not uniform, the wall may not be good. So as individuals, we should have good karma. It will result in a good wall, straight wall. The samuhik karma will be good.
Exactly.
And that is what is being talked about in Bhagavatam, that Ram Rajya, the kingdom of Lord Ramchandra, how that can be established even now if everybody takes to this way of life, which is spiritual.
Exactly. It's one person making a spiritual connection can actually change the world. In fact, it is described that even if like a very small percentage of this world becomes spiritual, we can actually change the course of this materialistic culture. So it's very powerful. And there's another aspect to it that, yes, you know, we are interested in our own happiness and our own spiritual culture and find our own inner peace. But at the same time, like we described before, a true spiritualist also wants to see the world happy, right? Sarvesham, you know, Shanti Bhavatu. We want to see that the whole world actually becomes a happy place. So for that, you know, we want to implement these principles, not just in our own life, but see how we can become an instrument of positive change and how we can bring about peace and happiness at a personal level, at a social level, and ultimately at a global level. And that has been the effort of all the great teachers.
Yeah.
So, Sindhu and Raghu.
Sindhu, your question is very valid. What does Krishna indicate as good karma? I got lost. Devotion or work? How do we do work without accumulating karma, good or bad? If we keep accumulating karma by work, we will have to be born again and again. How do we then attain moksha? So, very good question, and this is what Krishna is addressing here. The Brahmani adhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karotiya lipyate sana papena padma patram iva ambasa. So when we work with this mood of devotion, when we work this akarma, this whole principle of akarma is working for purification, working for the pleasure of the Supreme, working in this spirit of detachment, that I am not the enjoyer and owner of the fruits of my action. So when we work in that spirit, then naturally, just like lotus flower, we are not touched by good or bad karma. And there is no more karma that can bring us back into this material world.
Actually, akarma happens at the level of consciousness.
Right.
You know, because the work is the same. Duryodhan is also fighting a war. Arjuna is also fighting a war. At one level, they're both doing exactly the same action. But what's different is the level of consciousness. So when our consciousness is connected to the supreme consciousness, then that work that is done in that state of consciousness becomes akarma. And so when we come together and we spend time, for example, chanting the names of Krishna, we are connecting our individual consciousness to the supreme consciousness. And when we stay in that consciousness for the rest, because that consciousness we are going to carry through the rest of the day. So even though we may come together and chant together for 10 minutes or maybe half an hour, 1 hour, whatever we do, but that consciousness is going to, just like what Rajesh ji was saying, that one little bit of yogurt, if you put in a big container, the whole pot will become yogurt, right?
And another example that comes to my mind is like, there are 3 ways to cross a river. If you have like a roaring river, you can either try to swim on your own, right? And you'll get completely wet. The other way is to take a boat and then you can row the boat, but then there's a good chance that you will fall down in the river and then again get wet or maybe harmed. But the best way is if there is a bridge. If you can find a bridge that goes over the river, then you cross the river and then you're not touched by the water in any way. And that is the path of akarma. You still cross and then you're still crossing the river, doing the work, but you're not affected by the river of karma in any way.
And I guess your specific question of what akarma looks like, there's a reason why we haven't entered into akarma in great detail, because we are keeping that for the later chapter. There are 2 chapters coming up where we'll talk in great detail about akarma. So,
yeah.
So we just so thank you. And I guess if there's anything else on this section, should we go through and see if we are stopping at a natural?
I think because the next section starts with
renunciation.
Renunciation.
Okay. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah,
just type your questions, Prabhu.
So let's just.
No. I was saying that I have to leave.
Oh, you have to leave. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think the next question is, let's go down. How do we know that when we face constraints or challenges in our lives, we need to keep trying to overcome them or just walk away because it wasn't meant to be? Such a great question, Amrita. Really, really good. It's $1 million question because I think we've had this discussion with Shashi Prabhu also, that, you know, it seems like there are two parts. You know, there's one place where surrender means Arjuna getting on the chariot and fighting this big battle. And then on the other end of the spectrum is Draupadi. For those of you who don't know the story of Draupadi, she was being disrobed. She's the wife of Arjuna, and the Kaurava brothers actually tried to insult her, humiliate her by, they wanted to, basically remove all her clothing and enjoy her. And so she tries very hard to protect herself in this way and that way. And then finally, when she realizes that she cannot protect herself, she puts her hands up in the air and just calls out, "Hey Krishna, hey Govinda." And then Krishna supplies unlimited cloth to her, so they're not able to disrobe her. So sometimes as practitioners, we don't know, should I just put my hands up in the air, or am I supposed to get on a chariot and keep, trying to overcome our challenges? And in reality, that happens through the process of going deeper in our spiritual connection. So we always have to try our best to do whatever we can, but we have to leave it. Ultimately, if we find that there is nothing more for us to do, then that's where our dependence comes into the picture. I think there's a beautiful prayer that, "Oh Lord, help me change the things that I can, help me tolerate those that I cannot, and also give me the wisdom so that I can see the difference between the two." So this is wisdom that comes from deep spiritual consciousness, and there is no cut and dried, one size fits all kind of an answer to this. It is a matter. And also, when we have spiritual mentors, and we talked about a guru and a teacher, we also can consult that the intuition or the inspiration that we are receiving from within the heart, we can confirm that with other practitioners and those that are more advanced than us. And there is a process that we can figure out that what is it that Krishna really wants me to do at this point. But we have to stay open to our plans and Krishna's plan.
Yeah, in those kind of situations, again, taking guidance from other spiritually advanced people, guru or other sadhus, praying to Krishna. But in either situation, whether we face the challenge or we walk away from it, there is a mood of surrender to Krishna, and also accepting Krishna's will, either in fighting or in giving it up. So there are certain situations where maybe we have to walk away, but there are certain situations where we cannot walk away, or we rather don't want to walk away but face it. So that is guided by the super soul and the guru and the scriptures. We consult Bhagavad-Gita, and talk to people.
So anything else, any other? Delia, we haven't forgotten your question. We just haven't had time. So over the weekend, we will respond to your question. And I know Deidre also had a question that she had sent. So that question also, both those questions we'll respond to it, because you guys wanted one-on-one. So we'll just, we'll do a voice message and we'll send you over WhatsApp those answers. Thank you, Amrita. Anybody else? Naji? Yes, Delia, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused about the language that the Bhagavad-Gita uses to describe the different types of yoga. So what exactly is, how does it refer to jnana yoga, karma yoga, and bhakti yoga?
In karma yoga, work is, you're trying to connect through your work. So a person is working in the world and they're offering the results of their work to Krishna, maybe a part of the results. But their motivation karma yoga has a whole spectrum, but the general meaning of karma yoga is that the person hasn't developed a full understanding of God, but they have some understanding of God. They want to offer some results to God because they think that's a good thing to do. And they are trying to, but at the same time, they're attached to their work. They are also attached to the fruits of their work. And an advanced karma yogi he's not attached to the fruits of the work. He's just doing it without any sense of attachment. But he doesn't have a full attachment to the Supreme yet. So that's the karma yoga part.
Actually, one of the reasons, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the reasons why we get confused is because karma yoga
is like a spectrum.
It's a whole spectrum, and towards the towards the advanced stage of karma yoga, there is no difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga, because then also that's why there is some overlapping, so to speak, you know. And then jnana yoga also.
So jnana yoga is when a person becomes tired of working and it says this working in this world is like too much, and I just want to give up work and I just want to engage my mind and intelligence in meditating or understanding about the Supreme. So they take to the study. A typical jnana yogi, which is rarely found nowadays, he renounces the world, okay, and he takes to an exclusive study of the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutras, and completely dedicates his life to that. He tries to develop complete control of the mind and senses. He becomes a recluse basically. A jnana yogi is kind of a recluse from the society.
Because he's trying to use his mind and his intelligence to figure out, right? So, you know, there are a lot of prerequisites to the practice of jnana yoga. The first prerequisite is you cannot stay in a single family or a townhouse in suburban, you know, and you know, so Krishna actually speaks about that. You have to let go, become a complete celibate, you know, and just engage in, you know, just
the same thing applies for Ashtanga yoga also. The Ashtanga yogi also has to live a life of seclusion and complete control of the mind and the senses, but he focuses on meditating on the super soul. Whereas a jnana yogi, he focuses on studying the Upanishads and the Vedanta and just trying to figure out the Supreme through intelligence.
And his goal is the Brahma Jyoti, or the Brahman. Remember, we talked about these three kinds or three phases of understanding the absolute truth. So jnana yogi is more interested in sort of in the impersonal, you know, the Brahman effulgence. And the Ashtanga yogi, you know, which we know that, you know, we know one part of it is Hatha yoga, you know, the yoga that we generally think of, that has the second aspect, which is Paramatma realization as its goal, where through the practice of asanas and dhyana and, you know, niyamas, you know, yama, niyama, all of that, the idea is that I can somehow meditate on the super soul. And one of the goals of, sometimes a person can get sort of drift away and get entangled in the pursuit of mystic yoga perfections. So there are 8 kinds of mystic yoga perfections that one can attain, and some people can get caught up with that. And then bhakti is the process of approaching the supreme divine person.
So in bhakti, the person may be doing the same kind of work as a karma yogi, right? For example, somebody may be working as a doctor or engineer or whatever, but for a bhakti yogi, the motivation to work is to please the Supreme. The fruits of the work are also engaged to please the Supreme. And while working, he's conscious of the Supreme, or he tries to be conscious of the Supreme. Whereas a karma yogi doesn't necessarily have to do all that. Okay, I'm just working, and a part of the fruits I'll offer it to the Supreme. So he has a preliminary understanding of the Supreme. Whereas a bhakti yogi, he already has a good amount of understanding of the Supreme, and he wants to offer his life for the service of the Supreme. And work is just one aspect of his life. There are so many other aspects of his life. So you can see the difference between a karma yogi and a bhakti yogi.
And by the way, there'll be a whole segment where we'll talk about the yoga ladder. So then we'll get into more detail about all the different yoga systems and how they connect and compare and, you know, so on and so forth. But just to give you sort of a picture, some picture.
In today's day and age, it's really hard to find either of them. Like bhakti yogi is more easily foundable, but karma yogi and jnana yogi and ashtanga yogi also very, very difficult to find nowadays.
Yeah, it's hard to find them. But anyways, you know, the idea is that all of these things, they culminate, or you can find threads of that within bhakti, you know. So we still work and offer our result, you know. Anyways, it's a big topic.
So I see some more questions on your forehead.
So yes, thank you. Very helpful. So devotional service, when the Bhagavad-Gita talks about devotional service, it's talking about bhakti yoga, although devotional service does have some overlap with karma yoga. Am I understanding correctly?
Well, devotional service is bhakti yoga. And in bhakti yoga, a person will work just like any other person in the world. He is working. So he's engaged in karma, but it is not karma like a karma yogi.
Also, you know, see, we are getting into like the deep end of it. Like if you really want to know technically, even within the process of bhakti yoga, you can have what's called karma mishra bhakti. You can have what's called jnana mishra bhakti. So karma mishra bhakti means bhakti with tinges or mixture of karma in it. And then Jnana Mishra Bhakti is Bhakti, but it has Jnana, because our consciousness is not, it's always in a state of evolution. So even though I may say that I am practicing Bhakti, but hey, I have attachment to karma. I still have attachment to Jnana. So I'm not a pure Bhakti yogi. I still have other things that I'm also interested in. So Krishna still puts all of them under the category of Bhakti. He's so magnanimous. He says, everyone is bhakta. It's just that it's like a green mango and a ripe mango. So they're both mango, but this is still green. And then over a period of time, when all these other things are removed, then you'll become a ripe, sweet mango.
But I mean, there's a difference between the path itself and the person who's following the path, right? Bhakti yoga by definition is something. It's defined as this is how the person is living their life. But the person who's practicing, they may have these different conceptions, right? So I may be practicing Bhakti Yoga, which is like pure, but I'm myself not pure. So I may have attachment to Jnana, I may have attachment to karma, and maybe I'm doing like a mixture of it, right? But as long as I'm working under the guidance of a teacher or practitioner of Bhakti Yoga, I'll make advancement, and then gradually all these things will left behind.
One will get purified of these things. Naji, your question, which is better, Jnana Mishra Bhakti or Karma Mishra Bhakti? Well, we want to be free from both of them. Both are a mixture. And Prabhupada uses the word unalloyed. Unalloyed means no alloy. It's just complete pure gold.
Jnana Karmadi Anavirtam. Right? That's the definition of Bhakti is Jnana Karmadi Anavirtam. That is free from the tinges of Jnana and Karma. And I guess we don't have to worry so much about that. As we are practicing Bhakti, these things will automatically be left behind. So yeah, that's the main thing. I don't have to keep worrying about that constantly.
Because it's so subtle.
Yeah.
It's so subtle, as long as we are, because, and we can take it that we all have that mixture.
Yeah.
That's how we all start. In the beginning, everyone has a mixture, but it doesn't matter, as long as the goal is pure, then we will get purified along the way, right? If we don't have other goals, like if we say we're practicing Jnana Mishra Bhakti and then we start thinking, oh, my goal really is that I can become this big mystic yogi, and then I can produce ashes from my hands, and I can, if that's your goal, then there is some.
All right, sounds good.
So, Deidre, go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Relating to this karma yoga, jnana yoga and bhakti yoga. Suppose I have a desire. I want a kalpa vruksha. And I use all my resources and all efforts in search of kalpa vruksha.
Inside what?
This material world is there is kalpa vruksha in this material world, and I search for it. All my effort, that is karma yoga. Jnana yoga is the realization that what is the purpose of this kalpa vruksha in my life. Realization of this is Jnana yoga. And the point that we realize that Krishna is there and he will fulfill all my desires. It is bhakti yoga.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's very nicely put.
In Bhakti Yoga, one is dependent on Krishna. That's another way to look at it. In Jnana Yoga, one is dependent on one's mind and intelligence. In Karma Yoga, one is taking shelter of one's karma. He's not taking shelter of Krishna yet.
Very nice. I think Deidre had a comment here, and then we'll end. So Bhakti, work in a spiritual state of mind. Devotional yet somewhat detached, but still a duty. Lifestyle is part of it. The goal is to purify. Yes. Think and pure bhakti is our goal, and one has to just work through it. There's so many layers, just like Delia was saying. It's like peeling off the onion layers, right? So one just goes through that, and one finds, this real love over lifetimes. Well, we may surprise ourselves. Prabhupada also says, if we are really sincere, then we can do it in one lifetime. But really, to a devotee, it really doesn't matter. Lifetime after lifetime, as long as we get a chance to serve and to approach Krishna, then that was That was a mess. Sorry. Yes, the layers in the spectrum. Very nice. Thank you. You guys are amazing. You know, it's unbelievable. You know, your questions and your realizations.